As we learned in the Simplified View video, Message Analyzer simplifies network traffic and focuses on the upper layers. While this benefits us with performance gains and gets rid of noise, for some cases it affects the filtering results in an unexpected way. Let's learn how filtering with viewpoints can be used to limit the traffic you want to see. Recall from our Simplified View video, we represent messages as stacks of messages. An HTTP operation has a request and response grouped together, and then the response further has TCP fragments grouped together underneath it. When filtering on stuff like module names, addresses, and ports, everything works like you'd expect. But notice, if you try and filter on just HTTP requests, which is just one branch of the tree, the filtered results return the operation since it has a request, despite the fact that it also has a response. Because we group requests and responses together as operations, the results can't get rid of the responses. Now, what we need is a way to filter and reference a specific layer in the stack. We want to interpret and interact with the protocol layer from its viewpoint. If I want to filter on only the response, then the viewpoint of the top level operation, which is the default, is not the correct place to observe requests and responses. Instead, I need a viewpoint which looks below the operation. In Message Analyzer, we call this the Disable Operations viewpoint. Let's look at an example. I've loaded some HTTP traffic, which is shown as HTTP operations at the top level. When I choose the Disabled Operations viewpoint, the messages displayed in the analysis grid are redrawn with the operations hidden. Now we see individual request and response messages. But the key is that by default, filtering at the top occurs at the top layer only. So even if you filter on HTTP requests, you'll see the responses as well. This behavior is useful in some cases. For instance, to apply a filter like HTTP and then to zoom into another viewpoint like the TCP viewpoint. But imagine instead that when you zoomed in with your viewpoint, everything disappears. This happens because, as you might or might not expect, there's no HTTP module at the TCP layer. Sure, a port filter would work fine for this case, but when you use filtering with module names, which works wonderfully with Message Analyzer, you might get confused. So then one obvious question becomes, how do you filter at the viewpoint? How do I see just the HTTP requests? Well, there happens to be more than one kind of filter you can add. Recall in the UI overview that the toolbar, the filter toolbar that is something that I can add or collapse. When I select the Add Filter button, it adds a new filter expression, which I can then type in and apply. However, if I use the drop-down next to Filter, I see other possibilities. Separate to this discussion, you see a timeline filter, which you can use as an easier way to look at time ranges of the trace rather than just using a bulky filter. But more relevant to our plight is the viewpoint filter. It is only active when I have a viewpoint set. Adding this filter bar gives you an alternate space to type in a filter that applies to the current viewpoint. All filter controls that you add are ANDed together. Now, if you apply the HTTP request filter as a viewpoint filter, you see only the requests. At some point, and don't feel pressured, you should have an aha moment where filtering makes more sense. For some, that might be hours or days away, but once you see it. Disable operations is just one of the predefined viewpoints. If you want to filter to other layers and see TCP fragments, for instance, the TCP viewpoint is one option. Let's remove the HTTP request filter and apply the TCP layer viewpoint. The TCP viewpoint enabled, you see TCP summary in the analysis grid now, instead of the upper layer like HTTP. So another question that comes up is, when I apply a viewpoint, how do I know what the upper layer protocol is? TCP could represent an HTTP message or an SMB. Well, the message stack is one way you always know the tree based on the selected message. So in that case, I can see that HTTP is the top level. You can also add in columns for top level summary and top level module, which can make looking at the top level message available for every message. A built-in layout called performance top down also includes these columns by default. By the way, you can tell which viewpoint is active from looking either at the status bar or by hovering over the tab. Filtering with viewpoints is the key that unlocks the ability to filter from the top of the messages tree or at any layer in the stack. You should now have the ability to make any filter work the way you want to. And combining filters can enable some interesting scenarios. Hope you learned something, so bye for now.